my friend. I want
Fantastic.
I want to thank you for taking time to speak with me today.
No, thank you so much for the invite. We're delighted to be asked.
I wanted to ask, of course, I want to have a lot of questions about Balor One.
Oh,
Um,
brilliant.
um, First of all, how did the concept for the theme of the album come to you?
Oh man. Well, I mean, I've been really into history uh, for for years, and it was probably around the time that we first started Forlorn Hope, because when we got this band started, I already had the sort of the concept for the debut album Over the Hills in the work, sort of working that, and I was sort of I was overflowing with ideas and was thinking about future projects. And I can't remember how exactly I came to it, but I just sort of came across it in my reading, and something I've been aware of for a while was the Victoria Cross, which is Britain's highest military award for gallantry. It's been in place since 1856, and I think I just sort of gave that some thought and went, actually, the stories that go along with this are absolutely tailor made for a metal album. Because I'll be honest, a big part of why I'm why I'm into this history and why I put it to metal is because these stories are exciting and thrilling.
Sure.
And I don't have any problem with saying that it's a bit childish. I grant you, but if I'm being honest, that's part of the attraction. And these are just some of the most unbelievable, thrilling, horrific, heartbreaking stories you'll find. So it's a brilliant it's a really great sort of untapped theme for metal songs. And also, it gave me the opportunity to sort of do a wider concept, because our first album was all about one particular conflict. So this time I was able to sort of use this to dip into all these different conflicts, from the Crimean War right through to the Second World War. So yeah, it was that's a long answer to a short question.
No, but it's the background of the album that makes it so fantastic, I believe. It keeps you immersed throughout. And with the album cover as is, it also keeps you involved. And speaking of that, I wanted to ask you, who's responsible for the artwork for the album?
So all of our artwork is done by an absolutely fantastic Australian artist called Mitchell Nolt. He's done all sorts of work for video games, museums, books, you name it. I'd been following him for a long time because I'd found his historical work online. And then in 2018, when we were looking to do a second print run of our demo EP, we thought better invest in some decent artwork here, because we'd only had the logo on before. And I thought, well, I'll send him an email. Why not? He's probably way out my price range. But what's the harm in asking? And yeah, we've been working together ever since. And honestly, he's just fantastic. He's got the passion for the history as well. So he puts the effort in. He does the research. He gets the details right. And I think that really enhances the whole experience of the
Sure.
release for people. So yeah, he I think we owe a massive chunk of our sales to Mitchell's artwork.
And I wanted to ask you as well, in reference to the album cover, if you could speak on the track Down in Flames.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, so Down in Flames is about a chap called James Brindley Nicholson, who on the 16th of August 1940, during the Battle of Britain, was flying his Hawker Hurricane fighter over Southampton, and was caught by a German Messerschmitt 110 diving at him out of the sun. Classic fighter trick. Cockpit absolutely raked with cannon shells. He had shattered pieces of the cockpit plexiglass in his face. It severed his eyelid. His foot had been shattered. And what's worse, the reserve fuel tank of the Hawker Hurricane is just in front of you, underneath the cockpit. So this had been ruptured and was leaking. So his plane was also on fire. So completely. So what he then does, getting ready to bail out, he then sees another ME-110 below him in a sort of ideal target situation. So rather than doing, I think, the thing that any sensible person, certainly me, would have done, and getting the hell out of there, he gets back on the throttle, goes after this other ME-110 and shoots it down before bailing out, suffering horrific third-degree burns in the process, but manages to parachute to safety, makes a miraculous recovery, and ends up being the only pilot in fighter command to win the Victoria Cross during the Second World War. So that was the story. That was one of the first ones I came across, when I heard, there was only one VC for the Battle of Britain. When I was, looking into this, and I thought, well, that is going on the album. That is solid gold, stuff of heavy metal anthems. That's going on there. And then actually, like I say, we wrote the first draft of the song back in 2020 during COVID. In fact, me and back when we had, lockdown and social distancing rules, me and Alex, our lead guitarist, we had a jam session in my garden 3 meters away from each other with our amps working on this song. And like, the melody was always there, but it took us a ridiculously long time to actually get it right. Like, I always had in my head, this is what this song should sound like. I know this song is brilliant. We just haven't quite got it yet. And I think it took a certain amount of faith and perseverance on Alex's part to actually, stick with me on that one. And then last year, just something just clicked, and we cracked it, and it was just great. So yeah, it's definitely one of the most intense, full throttle tracks we've put out so far. It was a push for me as a vocalist. I think most listeners who've heard our other stuff can tell it's a bit higher than my usual range. So yeah, but I think that's a common theme on this new EP and this album. We have really tried to push ourselves as songwriters and musicians. But yeah, I couldn't be more pleased with it, and I'm so delighted that it's the cover image for the EP.
Yes. And also, I wanted to ask you, another one of my favorite tracks is The Last Ride, if you could speak on that one as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, The Last Ride is an interesting one from our perspective, because we actually wrote and finished The Last Ride before we recorded the first album. Wow. It goes back to like 2018, 19. It's been in the bank that long. And so for listeners who don't know, we're in this track takes us to the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879, obviously very famous over this side of the water because of the film Zulu with Michael Caine. I don't know how big that is over your side of the water, but yeah. So this is the so one of the things about the VC history, obviously with such a big chunk of its history being in the 19th century, we've got a lot of quite unpleasant colonial history to grapple with, and I think that's something we've tried our best not to we could have swerved that and done songs that were a bit easier, a bit less subjects that are a bit easier, a bit less controversial, but I think it was important to us to try and be upfront with that sort of history and address it with sort of honesty and integrity. So this is a track about the Battle of Isandlwana in 1879, where essentially the British invasion force was surprised in their camp and absolutely massacred by the Zulu army. And this is a story of Lieutenants Coghill and Melville, who attempted to save, or who supposedly attempted to save, I should say, because it's a very controversial story, and it's sort of there are the accounts of the actual action are very limited and very contested, but the story that we tell, the version of the story, the standard version that we tell in the song, is the story of them trying to escape from this massacre on horseback and save the regimental colour, the battle flag that the regiment carried on campaign, and essentially, and when they were sort of a few. They managed to get 5 miles from Isandlwana, and then crossing the river, Melville loses his horse, loses the color, nearly drowns. Coghill comes back to save him, but in doing that, he loses his own horse, and they are both caught and killed by the Zulus. So it's a really sort of it's a really exciting story, and I think, like I say, this was one we did. This is a song we did quite a while back, but I think it feels sort of, because we wrote it after the first album, it feels sort of feels a little more sophisticated, I think, than the first one.
Sure.
And it's great fun because it's been a real live favorite, and it has a real sort of cinematic sweep to it. You know, it's got a really energetic first half. You know, that maideny gallop is there right through, and then we have blistering guitar solo, and then this really cool, ominous slow down section, which has a lot of pathos and this big emotional ending. Like I say, I'm delighted that it's finally recorded and out there for people to listen to, because obviously anyone who's seen us live since 2019 will have heard it, but in this day and age where we're only playing a few gigs in the UK, and also there's been a pandemic in that time, and where, you know, we've got so many listeners online, I'm so delighted that all those people can now finally hear that song.
And another question I had for you, am I safe in assuming that there will be a Valor Part 2?
Oh, well, I mean, it would be a really weird and confusing title if there wasn't.
Yeah.
Yes, no, there absolutely is. So when so Valor is our second album, our second full-length album. It's going to have 15 tracks, but for reasons mainly of money. You know, we're a small self-funded band. We've never made a profit. Getting the funds together to record 15 tracks and produce them at the quality that we want is not really on the cards. But also, you know, it wasn't just a sort of forced. So what we decided to do was split the 15-track album into 3 5-track EPs, and release them in sequence as and when the money was there. But also, you know, it has its advantages, because I mean, the one thing that's great is that it means we can give all of these tracks the focus and the attention and the online push that they deserve. I mean, really, there isn't a track on here that we're not proud of. And I think sometimes when you put out a full album, you know, it's fantastic, but sometimes really great tracks that, you know, you're really proud of and you really want to talk about and shout about can get a little bit lost in the noise of, you know, the lead singles and stuff like that. So it means we can talk about it gives us the space to talk about these stories and give them all the attention they deserve, and also to be realistic in this day and age, when, you know, Spotify and social media algorithms are so important and dictate so much about, you know, what we do as musicians. If you have more content coming more regularly, rather than just, you know, doing it in one big lump, the algorithm favors that. And, you know, it's a shame that we're potentially seeing the death of, you know, the album standard of releasing music, but not much you can do about it. No point swimming against the tide.
Right. And, you know, it's an unfortunate thing, because the thing that, you know, that worries me about platforms such as Spotify is when I listen to material, I want to listen to it from top to bottom. I'm not a person to throw random tracks on a single playlist and go through from band to band or whatever. I want the full experience of the album, and I think that's an art that has been lost throughout the years.
Well, we try and cater to both markets. I mean, you know, I like a bit of physical media myself, so we've always put a lot of effort into our CDs. Like I say, we into the artwork and the graphic design. We do full booklets with all the history in there as well as the lyrics. So you know, we like to try and look after our traditionalists as well.
And speaking upon that, what is the best way to get a physical copy of the album and any
Well,
merchandise that you have?
Well, the best way and the worst way, because there's only one way, is to go to forlornhope.uk, and you can find our official web store there, just on the top toolbar, and you can get CDs, merch, t-shirts, pin badges, patches. We've got the lot.
Excellent. And I wanted to ask you if you could take me back in time. Tell me how this band became a reality.
Oh man, well. So back in 2014-15, I was in a vaguely symphonic band called Cathar. It was my first ever band. I joined it straight. I'd been one of the founder members. Started it straight after I'd finished university. Danny, the drummer, who's founder member of Forlorn Hope, he and I knew each other through the local metal scene because I'd been doing a sort of local music journalism and stuff on student radio. So I knew him from his old band. His old band had just broken up, and he got in touch with me and said, "We've been, do you want to do something symphonic?" And I wasn't really sure. I'd never been in a band before, but I thought, you know what? If I say no, I'm definitely going to regret that. So I did it, and me and Danny jammed out a few tracks. That was great. And then a full band formed around that. Which included Alex Bishop, guitarist of Forlorn Hope, and Jade McKenna, who was the original keyboardist for Forlorn Hope. So that band split up in 2015, all sort of went off and did our own things for a bit. And then in 2017, me and Alex and Danny and Jade came back together to do a fun little covers project just for a couple of gigs, just doing like hard rock covers of pop songs. It was a great laugh. And we got in our great mate John Ruffley on bass, who had been in a band with Danny for about a decade. So we all came together. We're having a great laugh doing these covers. And then Danny says, we've got a good unit here. If you thought about maybe doing something original, at which point I went, well, I have got this idea that I've been working on, because in between bands, I had sort of been thinking about what sort of music what I wanted to write. You know, what sort of, my mantra has since become, write the music that you want to listen to. So I kind of realized that the music I wanted to listen to was, number one, punchy and catchy and concise, and number two was about the sort of epic stories in military history that excited me. So I'd had a go at writing a couple of songs. That was very early in my sort of songwriting journey, and Alex had helped me out with those. So we had a few of those sort of sat on a file on his computer, not doing a whole lot. But I sort of pitched the idea to the band. I said, well, what do you think? Let's take this forward. You know, I've already got the name. I've got an idea for an album. We've got a few tracks sorted. Do you want to have a go? I thought they'd say no way in hell. That sounds really niche and nerdy and boring. But they were up for it. More fool them. And so then we powered on. We spent about a year writing the album, playing every gig we could get to sort of refine the sound. And then in 2019, we hit the studio, recorded the debut album, and the rest is history.
Amazing. And I wanted to ask you as well. You said that you came up with the name. What was the inspiration for the name of the band?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna get all history nerd on you again. So the term Forlorn Hope is something I'd picked up on reading Napoleonic history, which was, my sort of first big history love, and also, reading far too many of Bernard Cornwell's sharp novels. And like I said, Forlorn Hope is a term that's been around for centuries, has been used in various different sort of military contexts, but in that Napoleonic context, when you were besieging a fortress in the Napoleonic era, you'd basically spend a week or so battering the walls with your cannons, blowing a big hole in the walls, a breach. and then you'd storm that under cover of night. But the issue is someone has to go first, and there's probably mines and traps and barricades and every single gun in the fortress trained on that breach. So whoever goes first is probably not going to have a great time of it. And the unit of men who went first were called the Forlorn Hope. And you know, it's often said that, you know, there was never any shortage of volunteers for it, because while you were taking a tremendous risk, if you survived, you know, there would be promotion, there would be fame, there would be money for you. So yeah, I think it definitely came after I started writing the songs, and then it just popped into my head and went, oh my god, that's the perfect name for a metal band. So yeah, delighted. I was delighted that I thought of that.
And lastly, I wanted to ask you, if you could give a message to your fans, what would that message be?
Oh, thank you. Honestly, so we had a long break. We had about a 2-year sort of, not a hiatus because we didn't stop, but you know, functionally it kind of was a hiatus because we had a couple of members leave the band. It was post-COVID. We were in a bit of a mess, really. And so it took us a couple of years to get ourselves sorted and get ourselves back on our feet. And you know, I was quite worried that when we put something out, that, you know, if you go away for 2 years, especially when you're only a small band with, you know, 3,000 followers or something like that, people aren't going to be, you know, people aren't going to hang around for 2 years, and, you know, we're going to come back, be back at square one, have to start all over again. But honestly, we just have the best little core of loyal fans who stuck with us through through the whole gap, who have just shown nothing but enthusiasm for the whole project, have been so supportive. I've put up their money for our crowdfunder to help us get the album over the line and not have to, you know, slash the budget and knock it down to a lesser release. And yeah, our fans are great and I love them. So yeah, thank you is the one message I would say to our fans.
Well, I wanted to take a moment to thank you, my friend. This was my first listen to the band, and I was taken in from moment one all the way through, and I can't wait to hear what lies ahead, where Valor goes from here, because it's great stuff, my friend, and I think you're on to something quite amazing.
Oh, you're a gent. Thank you so much for having me, and please keep up the good work. You know, independent rock and metal journalist like you do so much for independent bands like mine. So thank you for all your hard work.
Well, thank you, my friend, and you have a great rest of your day.
You too, mate. I'll see you when part 2 comes out.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Take care. Bye. Bye.